Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel, where we take the science that's buzzing all over the fitness world and actually break it down for you in a way that makes sense. I'm Maya.
And I'm Ryan. And today, we are going into territory that I have genuinely been obsessed with for the last few months.
Same, because this topic is everywhere right now. You cannot go on a fitness subreddit, a gym TikTok, a health podcast, without running into this word.
BPC-157.
BPC-157, and people are losing their minds over it. Some people are calling it the most powerful healing compound they have ever used in their life. Others are calling it dangerous, unregulated, and something you should absolutely stay away from.
And the truth, as always, is somewhere in between. But it is a really fascinating in-between, because the science behind this thing is genuinely interesting.
So today we are doing a full breakdown. What is BPC-157? Where does it actually come from? What does the research say? What are the real risks? And should you, as a fitness or health enthusiast, even be thinking about it?
No hype, no affiliate links, just what the science and the clinical world actually says.
If you are new here, welcome. We do this every day. Real science, real talk, no nonsense. Hit subscribe so you do not miss the next one.
Okay, let us get into it.
So Ryan, let us start from the very beginning, because I think a lot of people hear BPC-157 and they assume it is some kind of synthetic lab creation, like somebody just cooked this up in a chemistry lab somewhere.
Right. And that is actually not the full story. So BPC stands for Body Protection Compound, and it is a 15 amino acid peptide, which just means it is a short chain of amino acids, the building blocks of proteins.
And here is the interesting part. BPC-157 is actually derived from a much larger protein that exists naturally in your stomach.
Yes. So researchers, particularly a group in Croatia back in the early 1990s, were looking at gastric juice, the stuff your stomach produces to break down food, and they found this giant protein they called BPC, and within that protein they identified a 15 amino acid sequence that seemed to be responsible for a lot of the protective effects.
So they basically isolated the active part, and that became BPC-157.
Exactly, and the reason they were interested in gastric juice in the first place goes back even further, like all the way to Pavlov. Most people know Pavlov for the dog experiments, the bell, the salivation.
The classic.
But Pavlov also did a lot of work on gastric juices, and there were actually early reports, back in the 1900s, that gastric extracts from dogs seemed to have healing effects on people with digestive issues. People were literally drinking this stuff.
Okay, that is a little alarming.
Yeah, it was a different era. But the point is, the Croatian research group in the 90s picked up on that thread. They said, okay, if there is something healing in the gut, what is it? Let us find the specific compound, and BPC-157 is what they found.
And it is important to note here, we do not naturally produce BPC-157 itself. What we produce is the larger parent protein. BPC-157 is the isolated fragment.
Right. So it is not like testosterone where your body makes it and you are just supplementing more. BPC-157 is a synthesized peptide based on a sequence found in a natural compound. That distinction matters when we talk about safety later.
Okay, so now that we know what it is, what does it actually do? Because the claims around this thing are wild.
They really are. So let us talk about the animal data, because that is really where most of the research lives right now. So the Croatian research group, and they are really the primary group who has studied BPC-157, they have done all kinds of experiments on animals, mice, rats, rabbits, and the results are genuinely impressive.
What kinds of things were they testing?
Everything. They would sever tendons in mice and give them BPC-157, and the tendons healed significantly faster than the control group. They cut ACLs, they induced burn wounds, they caused nerve damage, and over BPC-157 seemed to accelerate the healing process.
That is honestly remarkable, because nerve regeneration especially, that is notoriously difficult to achieve. Central nervous system injuries, optic nerve damage, these things do not heal easily, at all.
Exactly. And that is one of the most striking things about BPC-157 in the animal literature. It does not seem to be doing one specific thing. It seems to be this broad general pro-healing signal that works across completely different tissue types.
Which is kind of weird if you think about it, because a neuron is a totally different cell from a tendon fiber, or from the lining of your gut. Why would the same compound help all of them? And that is actually one of the most puzzling things about BPC-157 scientifically. We do not fully understand the mechanism. Unlike a lot of drugs that hit a specific receptor and you can map out exactly what happens, BPC-157 does not even have a clearly identified receptor. Wait, it does not have a known receptor?
No known receptor, which is unusual. Most compounds work by docking into a specific receptor on a cell, like a key fitting into a lock. BPC-157 does not seem to do that, or if it does, we have not identified the lock yet.
So what is it doing instead?
The current thinking is that it might be modifying certain proteins, helping them interact in more favorable ways for gene expression. It also seems to increase something called VEGF signaling, that is vascular endothelial growth factor, which basically means it promotes the growth of new blood vessels in injured areas. More blood flow, more healing factors getting delivered to the site.
That makes sense from a recovery standpoint. More blood supply to a tendon or a nerve means more of everything the body needs to repair itself.
Exactly. It also seems to modulate nitric oxide synthesis, which helps dilate blood vessels. And interestingly, in studies where they gave corticosteroids alongside BPC-157, which normally slows wound healing, BPC-157 seemed to counteract that effect. The healing continued anyway.
Okay, so the animal data is genuinely impressive, but here is the big question. What about humans?
And this is where things get much more limited. The honest answer is, we do not have a lot of formal human data. The same Croatian group did conduct two small trials, a phase 1 and a phase 2, using BPC-157 as a rectal enema for ulcerative colitis patients.
Which is a very different application than what most people in the fitness world are using it for.
Totally. But those trials showed no significant adverse effects in phase 1 and a positive signal in phase 2, meaning some improvement in the ulcerative colitis. The problem is the full data from those trials is not publicly available, only the abstracts, so we cannot fully evaluate the methodology.
And they came from the same group that discovered BPC-157 in the first place.
Which is another flag. Almost all the research on this compound comes from one research group. That is not necessarily a sign that the research is bad, but it does mean it has not been independently replicated at scale. And in science, independent replication is everything.
So we have strong animal data, limited human trial data, and a mechanism we do not fully understand. That is the current state of the science.
That is exactly where we are, and it is a frustrating place to be. Because the animal data is compelling enough that a lot of researchers and clinicians genuinely believe there is something real here, but the human evidence just is not there yet to confirm it.
Okay, so let us talk about what is actually happening in the real world, because BPC-157 is not just being discussed in academic circles anymore. It has exploded in the fitness community. People are buying it, injecting it, taking it orally. So what is driving that?
A few things. First, the anecdotal reports are really strong. Athletes, gym goers, fitness enthusiasts who have tried BPC-157 for injuries, a lot of them are reporting faster recovery times that surprised even them.
And the injuries people are using it for are the worst kind, the stubborn ones. Tendon injuries, ligament problems, chronic joint pain that just will not go away no matter how much you rest.
Right, and if you have ever dealt with a bad tendon injury, you know how miserable that is. Tendons have poor blood supply, they heal slowly, months and months of being out of the gym, so when people hear, hey, there is something that might speed that up, of course they are going to try it.
And the most famous story in the peptide world, which is basically folklore at this point, is the athlete who supposedly had a complete Achilles tendon tear before a major competition. took BPC-157 locally injected for a few months, and still competed and medaled.
Now, to be clear, that story is not verified. We do not know exactly what that athlete did or did not take, and even if it is true, we do not know what else they may have been doing alongside it.
But stories like that are what drive adoption, especially in a community that is already comfortable with pushing limits and trying things that are not mainstream.
And there is another big factor here, the GLP-1 revolution, the Ozempic wave. Because millions of people have now gotten comfortable with injecting themselves, a tiny subcutaneous injection does not feel scary anymore to a huge chunk of the population. That has dramatically lowered the psychological barrier to trying other injectable compounds, which is a real shift. 5 years ago, if you told most people at a regular gym that you were injecting yourself with something, they would have looked at you like you were insane. Now it is much more normalized, and BPC-157 kind of rode in on that wave. It was already popular in the bodybuilding and biohacking world for years, but it reached mainstream fitness culture right around the time GLPs went mainstream.
So people are taking it. But how? What does that actually look like?
A few ways. The most common in the fitness world is subcutaneous injection, which means injecting just under the skin, usually near the site of an injury. Some people inject intramuscularly, and some people take it orally, either as a capsule or dissolved in water.
And the dosages?
Most people in the fitness community are working with somewhere around 200 to 500 micrograms per day. But here is the thing. Nobody actually knows what the right human dose is. The doses used in animal studies do not translate directly to humans, and there are no formal human dosing guidelines because the formal human trials just have not been done.
So people are kind of guessing.
Essentially, yes. Based on what they read online, what their gym community recommends, what peptide websites suggest, which is not a great way to determine dosing for anything that goes into your body.
Okay, let us talk about risks, because I think this is the part that does not get enough airtime in these conversations.
Agreed. So first, the safety data we do have from the animal studies is actually relatively reassuring. They have injected animals with doses many times higher than what humans typically use, and there have been no clearly identified adverse effects. They cannot even establish what is called an LD50, the dose that would be lethal to 50% of animals, because the compound seems to be remarkably non-toxic at high doses.
That sounds reassuring, but
there are real concerns. The biggest one from a mechanistic standpoint is angiogenesis, the growth of new blood vessels. BPC-157 promotes this, and in the context of healing, that is great. But here is the worry. If you have a pre-existing tumor somewhere in your body that you do not know about, and most people who have early-stage tumors do not know, promoting blood vessel growth could potentially feed that tumor and help it grow faster.
and that is terrifying because you would have no way of knowing.
Exactly. Now, to be fair, there are no documented cases of this happening, no animal studies that have shown a clear cancer-promoting signal with BPC-157, but the theoretical risk is real enough that physicians take it seriously.
What about other known side effects?
Some people report angiomas, small collections of blood vessels near the skin, getting worse while taking BPC-157, which again makes sense given the VEGF pathway it activates. Some people report what they describe as anhedonia, a kind of emotional flatness or reduced motivation. Interestingly, there are also reports of BPC-157 blunting the effects of stimulants like Adderall, which suggests it is doing something in the dopaminergic system that we do not fully understand.
So it is not just a simple healing compound. It is interacting with brain chemistry too.
Right. And that homeostatic effect, meaning it seems to prevent things from going too far in either direction, is interesting but also unpredictable. We saw in animal models that mice given BPC-157 got less intoxicated from alcohol and had reduced withdrawal symptoms. Which sounds cool until you realize we do not know exactly what it is doing to the signaling pathways that govern all of that.
Okay, so let us talk about where people are actually getting this stuff, because that is a whole other layer of the conversation.
Yes. And this is honestly where a lot of the real-world risk lives, because BPC-157 is not FDA approved. It is not something your regular doctor can just write you a prescription for in most cases.
So what are people doing?
There are basically a few tiers. At the top, you have compounding pharmacies that can legally prepare custom medications. For a while, BPC-157 was available through compounding pharmacies in the US. In late 2024, it got moved onto a restricted list, which made that more complicated.
And there is also something that goes under a different name now?
Yes, some compounding pharmacies have started labeling essentially the same compound as PDA, pentadecapeptide arginate, which is BPC-157 in a slightly different salt form. Same compound, different name, different regulatory category, which tells you a lot about how murky this space is.
And below that?
Gray market, which is the huge category of websites that sell BPC-157 labeled as for research purposes only, which technically means it is not being sold for human use. But everyone knows that most people buying it are using it on themselves.
Maya. And the quality of those products?
Completely variable. Some of them may be fine. Some may be contaminated, mislabeled, underdosed, overdosed. You genuinely do not know. All the raw materials for these peptides come from China. They are then processed and packaged here. But the quality control at gray market research chemical sites is nothing like what you would get from a regulated pharmacy.
There was even a story of someone who thought they were buying one peptide and ended up with something completely different.
Yes, someone went viral on social media after noticing their skin was getting darker after using what they thought was a GLP-1 compound. It turned out they had been injecting melanotan-2, a totally different compound that stimulates melanin production, which is alarming and a perfect example of why sourcing matters enormously.
So the bottom line on sourcing, if someone is going to explore this at all, they need to be extremely careful about where it comes from.
Physician-led is the safest option. Talk to a doctor who is knowledgeable about this space. Get it from a reputable compounding pharmacy. Do not just buy something off a research chemical website because a guy in a gym or a TikTok influencer recommended it.
Okay, we have covered a lot of ground. Let us actually answer the question we promised to answer. BPC-157, miracle peptide or just hype?
And my honest answer is neither. It is genuinely promising science that is stuck in a frustrating limbo.
Say more.
The animal data is real. It is not made up. These studies show legitimate, reproducible healing effects across multiple tissue types in multiple models. That does not happen with things that are completely ineffective. Something is going on here.
And the anecdotal reports from humans, while they are anecdotal, are consistent enough across enough people to suggest this is not just placebo.
Right? Placebo effects are real, but placebo does not typically make a grade 2 tricep tear heal in 3 weeks. Placebo does not make an athlete with a severe Achilles injury compete again. Those kinds of outcomes suggest an actual biological effect.
But, and this is a big but, we do not have the clinical trials to confirm this. We do not have the dosing protocols. We do not have long-term safety data. We do not fully understand the mechanism. And we do not know what the compound does in people who have hidden tumors or certain genetic profiles or specific health conditions.
And the frustrating truth is, we probably will not get those clinical trials anytime soon. Because BPC-157 is not a patentable drug in a way that would incentivize a pharmaceutical company to spend hundreds of millions running large-scale trials, there is no clear financial model that makes that investment worthwhile for a commercial entity.
Which is a systemic problem with how we fund and incentivize medical research. But that is a whole other episode.
Definitely a whole other episode. But the point is, BPC-157 exists in this weird space where the science suggests it could be genuinely useful for things like tendon injuries, gut health, and certain neurological conditions, but we cannot confirm that with the level of evidence we would normally want before recommending something.
So what does that mean practically for someone listening to this right now who is dealing with a chronic injury and wondering if this is worth trying?
A few things. First, talk to a doctor, a real one, not someone with an affiliate code, a physician who is actually educated on peptides and can assess your specific situation, your health history, and whether this is appropriate for you.
Second, if you do decide to explore it, source matters more than almost anything else. Get it from the cleanest, most regulated source you can access. The gray market has too many unknowns.
Third, make sure the basics are already in place. Sleep, nutrition, consistent training, stress management. BPC-157 is not going to fix a broken foundation. No compound is.
And fourth, understand the uncertainty going in. You are not taking something with decades of clinical trial data behind it. You are operating on promising animal science and a large body of anecdotal human experience. That is a real difference.
And if you are someone with any kind of cancer history, family history of cancer, or other significant health conditions, this is a conversation you really need to have with your doctor before even considering it.
Absolutely. The theoretical angiogenesis risk is real enough that it should not be dismissed.
But if you are a healthy person dealing with a stubborn injury and you have done your research and spoken to a knowledgeable medical professional, BPC-157 is something worth knowing about. The science is interesting enough that dismissing it entirely would also be wrong.
Let us bring it all together. Because we covered a lot today.
BPC-157 is a 15 amino acid peptide derived from a naturally occurring protein in your stomach. It has been studied primarily by one Croatian research group, mainly in animals, and the results show accelerated healing across tendons, ligaments, nerves, and gut tissue.
It does not have a clearly identified receptor, which makes the mechanism partially mysterious, but it appears to promote blood vessel growth, modulate nitric oxide, and interact with dopamine pathways in ways that go beyond simple tissue repair.
Human clinical trials are extremely limited. The most formal data comes from a small ulcerative colitis study that showed no significant adverse effects and a modest positive signal. Full data is not publicly available.
The risks include theoretical cancer promotion through angiogenesis, unpredictable neurological effects, and significant sourcing concerns given that most of the supply chain runs through gray market research chemical websites.
It is not FDA approved. Regulations around it are in flux. If you are going to explore it, physician guidance and clean sourcing are non-negotiable.
The answer to miracle or hype, it is neither. It is a genuinely interesting compound that is waiting for the clinical research it deserves. Whether that research ever happens is a different question, but the science is real enough to take seriously.
And that is what we are here for, to take it seriously, without the hype in either direction.
Here's what we want to know from you today. Have you tried BPC-157? What was your experience? Drop it in the comments. We genuinely read all of them, and your story might be exactly what someone else needs to hear before making their own decision.
If this episode gave you something useful, share it with one person in your life who is dealing with an injury or curious about this space. That is how we grow this community.
Subscribe if you have not already. New science every week. No affiliate codes, no hype. Just the real stuff.
I'm Ryan
And I'm Maya. Stay curious, stay healthy, and please talk to your doctor before you inject anything.
See you in the next one.